Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about Chinese religion and society. Not as much society as you think, but the ideas of some core beliefs and structure that have really impacted Chinese society going all the way back to the ancient times. We've just finished talking about the basics of early China, and now we're going to get into some things that are really going to impact China both in ancient times and today. Now, Chinese ancestor worship, or what is traditionally referred to as traditional Chinese belief, is a religion in which the vast majority of people believe in a large group of gods. This is a polytheistic religion. If you look on the right there, you can read through. You have a variety of different gods and goddesses that the Chinese pray to. The Chinese also believe in the human spirit, or that many people in the West would call the soul. And they do kind of believe in an afterlife of heaven and hell-ish places, but really the spirits of our deceased ancestors are still with us today. Now, in modern day, this is still a very popular religion and still very important, because it is a very individualized religion. And when we talk about this in Hinduism and some other religions that we're going to be getting into, you're going to see that there is a focus on the individual and the family in the Eastern religions versus the Western religions. And the role of living people is this. You do not pray directly to the gods. The gods can't hear your prayers, nor are they going to listen for them. Instead, the spirits of your ancestors act as intermediaries between you and the gods. And so it is your responsibility to honor them and to pray to them regularly. And if you want good fortune, you pray to your ancestors. Those spirits will intervene with the gods on your behalf, and life is good. If you don't do that, then life is not so good. And not surprisingly, as a result, what we see here is that family is incredibly important in China, and we'll see this also with Confucianism. But this really, guys, is the base religion that you see throughout China today. Yes, there's Buddhism and there's a little bit of Christianity, Islam, but for the most part it is ancestor worship that is the building block. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't other types of religion there. The other main religion you're going to find in China is Daoism. Daoism was founded by this man by the name of Lao Tzu. You see him here. Sometimes around the 5th century BCE. From what we know of him, we believe that he was a government official, maybe near the end of the Zhou dynasty. But we know he was a man that basically constructed a religion that is heavy belief on spirits and things like that, but it's this kind of spiritual way of life. What Lao Tzu discussed was that there is a force, okay, that leads all humans, and that is the Tao, hence Daoism. And the idea is that the Tao is this force that runs the universe, and it is a perfectly balanced force, as it shown in this picture you see in front of you here by the yin and the yang. Now, what your job is as a person is to lead a life of balance, leading a life that you are one with nature, and leading a life in which you meditate and contemplate what your actions are all about. That life should be simple and that you just embrace this universal energy. Again, in this kind of energy, this is almost similar to Hinduism with the idea of the Brahman and the idea of living a life full of balance and simplicity. And that was the whole idea. Now, what a great thing about Taoism is it's full of like sayings. The Tao Te Ching, which is the holy scripture of Taoism, which really isn't that long, is a collection of sayings in which you can live life. So for instance, in this case, water is soft and weak, but it can move earth and carve stone. As you can see here, you see this water going through. It's a little river, but it's going to wither away that stone. And the idea is you need to be like water. You need to be flexible. You need to be willing to work with others, but you can still be strong in your convictions. What I like about Taoism, it's really interesting. It's full of these steps that are very personal, like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or at the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. Again, a very personal religion, this deep meditation that it is your job to figure out your life and to live a life of balance, and that you can become one with the universe. Now, some other basic beliefs, they're very anti-violent, very pro-war. Once again, you do have belief in ancestor worship here, so it's kind of the idea that Daoism, whereas you still follow the old religion, it's kind of a new take on it. The whole idea is that the theme, as I have here, personal understanding and growth. The idea that if you believe in the yin and the yang, that you lead a balanced life, that you worship your ancestors properly, that you avoid violence, that when you pass away, your spirit will kind of commune with the universal energy or the Tao. Now, Taoism has become very popular in America and other places. On the right here, you see there was an author that wrote a book called The Tao of Pooh, that, believe it or not, it was about Winnie the Pooh and the idea of how you could apply Taoism to his life. And it was really a big seller. If you kind of find this interesting, I would go check it out. And the other reason why a lot of people do like it as well is that Taoism really doesn't believe in government involvement, that the government should just do everything to keep peace, and they shouldn't tax people, they should avoid war, and again, letting people be who they were. And I think that's why Taoism was so popular and still very popular today. All right, and going all the way back to about, 2,500 years ago. The big deal, though, at this time in ancient China was the development of Confucianism. It is important to understand that Confucianism is not a religion, it is an ethical and moral way of living. But Confucius has become so popular, some people consider him to be a god, but that he is, and this way of life is like a religion. Okay, now Confucianism was founded by this guy. His name is Confucius, and we believe he was kind of a teacher slash government official that traveled around ancient China, sometimes between 551 and 479 BCE. Unfortunately, he didn't write anything down, although he had a great many disciples who did, the most notable being Menicus, who was really big on spreading Confucianism about 200 years after the death of Confucius. But we have a lot of his works and his ideas in a collection called the Analects. I think you could liken it to the gospel, kind of like the Quran as well, that it tells stories and parables, and you can kind of get this idea of what he's all about through reading. We do have a tomb, though, for him, okay? And actually, he did have a wife and many children. There are believed to be 2 million descendants of his alive today that can actually be fairly verified. So if you ever get a chance to go to China, you can go to his tomb. Now, first and foremost, he is very big on ancestor worship. At no point does he feel that people should stray from ancestor worship. It is important to honor the gods, it is important to honor your ancestors. Rather, he focuses on society and how society should work. There are 3 core ideas of Confucianism that are important to understand, and one of them is Shu, or the golden rule. The whole idea, what you do not, what done to yourself, do not do to others. We call this the ethics of reciprocity, and this is one of the earliest known enunciations of this rule. And this is going to be really big on with Confucianism, this idea that society needs to function and people need to work together. And if you don't do that, then society fails. And that's why the golden rule is so crucial, because if people would use this more, then we might not have as many problems as we do. The second idea is Zhen, or Ren, sometimes pronounced, that this is the idea that people are social creatures, that we work well together, and that we have sympathy and compassion. Now, the next step in this is the idea of Li, or manners and etiquette. And I think this is something that is crucial that we often lack in this country. And I'd like you to think about it, that I think in this country, a lot of the times, we tend to get more shocked by behavior that is good than behavior that is bad. I once held a door for a woman. Well, I actually held 2 doors. I opened one door and then we went through it, and then I opened another door for her, And she was very excited, said thank you, and was basically shocked that I would open 2 doors for her. But that's a basic thing of manners. And that's what Confucius stressed, this kinds of manners and etiquette. You see there are 2 men bowing next to each other before they're going to sit down and drink some tea. That we need to have this mutual respect for all people, and that manners and good manners equals a good society. Now, Confucius is alive and practicing during the time of the Warring States, so it makes a lot of sense that he would believe in this. But think about it next time and how far things can go if you're just courteous and nice to people rather than going the other direction. I think you might get a lot further in life. Now, for him, he also believed that there were 5 key relationships in the world, and that's ruler to subject, parent to child, husband to wife, the elders to the youngers, and friend to friend. And I really want you to know that that's why the computer keeps doing it over and over and over and over again. Okay, now the whole idea with these relationships, now that we have them established for my minor technical glitch, is that each side has a superior and an inferior side. The left column, the parents, the elderly, the rulers, the man or the husband, and the friend, are the superior. And on the other side, you are inferior. And what you see is that the right side basically needs to obey at any and all times. And that the rules of society and the expectations of society are that that right column, so the children, the younger, the subjects, the women, and the friends, are, they need to obey really without question. And that's the whole idea. I'm sure some of you would have a major problem with this today, but that's how it works. Now, on the left side, with these rules and expectations, is the left side with the parents, the elderly, the rulers, the man, and the friends who are in a stronger position. Their job is to provide, their job is to be leaders, their job is to protect the right side. And if you think about it, this concept of relationships really isn't that far off base. I mean, you really break everything in life down to relationships. But in here, you have this strict development. It's kind of like a caste system, if you will, but it's just much larger. Now, this can make it very good, and you can absolutely get an orderly society by listening to all of these things. However, there are some issues that do develop, most notably gender. Once again, and we've talked about this already, women really with little to no rights here. They really don't have any opportunities. And as you can see, the job for women is to be, fidelity, in other words, to honor their husband and to keep distance. And what do we mean by that? The distance is that they need to really just obey. And men, for the distances, they need to be the leaders. And you're going to see this, and the rights for women, unfortunately, the negatives with Confucianism, it's just going to get a little bit more negative as we move on into the future. I don't know if that was his intent, but the fact of the matter that he feels that women are inferior to men, unfortunately, that wasn't new. But this idea of developing these relationships and that the left side takes care of everybody, the right side obeys and listens, it really is tremendously influential. And what we get the impact of Confucianism here is, first and foremost, Confucius was really big on history and writing. And the idea that if we want to understand the future, that we do need to look at the past, and the past can tell us the ideas of how we can fix things and how we can make things better. And in the end, me as a history teacher, I'm a big fan of that. Also, Confucius himself was educated, and as a result, there's a focus on education, that you need to be able to read his works. And what we will see is that schools will open up all over China. On the picture on the right there is actually a Confucian school. And so this really is tremendous in the impact that it has. And China, whereas today their education is getting better, Mao Zedong is going to mess that up. If you look throughout most of history, China had the most advanced schools in the world, and it was a place that even if you were from the lower classes, if you could get yourself into school, you could be educated and you could pull yourself out of poverty. As a result, because of this responsibility of the rulers to subjects, we will see the development of law codes and really carrying them out properly. And the family, of course, becomes even more important here because of these key relationships. So you already have the importance of the family in the ancestor worship. Now we have it on this ethical code, so you can see it building and building. And probably the biggest thing is that when people read Confucius, one of the big things they got out of him in these relationships and understanding things was this idea of the meritocracy, that the people who are the most skilled should serve. Now, this doesn't really count for, say, the emperor, but to go along with the schools, if you want to be a government functionary, as well if you want to rise up in, say, the army, that it is based on merit and that only the best can serve in the government. And what we're going to see, despite the time at the end of dynasties where it gets a little sketchy, that Chinese governments tend to be very strong and Chinese governments tend to be very run because they have the best people for them. The biggest negative impact, of course, is the impact on women. Women will be pushed further down by Confucius and these ideals, and they're really going to struggle, and we still see it as an impact today. But if we look at the ancestor worship as well as Daoism and Confucianism, where we're seeing a little bit of a shift here, and to very similar to Hinduism, the difference from the West, if you will, is that you have these religions as well as these ethical codes that focus on your own actions and that individuals should be responsible for their own actions. And that's really, really crucial. So yes, accountability is something that we need to take into effect here. And this is really going to continue to influence China, and we're going to talk a lot more about Confucians as we move on. All right, I'll see you guys in class. Make sure you get your questions.